8-year-old Tommy had always been different from other children. Born with Down syndrome, he saw the world through eyes filled with wonder and pure joy. His parents, Sarah and Michael, had learned early on that their son's heart was bigger than most people could imagine. While other children his age were interested in video games and cartoons, Tommy had developed an unusual fascination with something quite unexpected: the Royal Guards. It all started during a school trip to London when Tommy was 6 years old. The class had visited many famous landmarks, but when they reached Buckingham Palace, something magical happened. Tommy's eyes grew wide as he spotted the tall figures in their red uniforms and black bearskin hats, standing perfectly still at their posts. While his classmates giggled and took pictures, Tommy stood mesmerized, watching these guards with complete fascination. "Mummy, they're like real-life toy soldiers," he whispered to his teacher, Mrs. Henderson, who was helping supervise the trip. His innocent observation made everyone smile, but for Tommy this wasn't just a casual comment. Something about the guards' dedication, their serious expressions, and their important job protecting the Queen captured his imagination in a way nothing else ever had. From that day forward, Tommy's bedroom became a shrine to the Royal Guards. His walls were covered with pictures he had drawn of guards in their distinctive uniforms. He spent hours coloring red coats and black hats with his crayons, often staying within the lines better than children twice his age. His collection of toy soldiers grew as relatives and friends began bringing him guard figurines from their own trips to London. Every evening before bed, Tommy would line up his toy guards in perfect formation on his dresser. He would salute them good night, practicing the serious expression he had seen on their faces. His parents watched with both amusement and admiration as their son's dedication to this interest never wavered. Other children might lose interest in hobbies quickly, but Tommy's love for the Royal Guards only grew stronger. At school, Tommy would often tell anyone who would listen about his guards, as he called them. During show and tell, he would bring his favorite toy soldier and explain to his classmates how the guards protected the Queen and never moved while on duty. His enthusiasm was infectious, and soon other children began asking him questions about the guards, making Tommy feel special and knowledgeable about his favorite subject. His speech therapist noticed that Tommy spoke more clearly when talking about the Royal Guards than any other topic. The passion in his voice seemed to help him overcome some of his communication challenges. His parents realized that this wasn't just a childhood phase. The Royal Guards had become Tommy's inspiration, his heroes, and his greatest source of joy. As Tommy's 9th birthday approached, his parents began planning something special. They had noticed how their son would often stand in front of the mirror, trying to mimic the guard's posture and serious expression. He would spend long minutes practicing standing perfectly still, just like he had seen them do. Sarah and Michael knew their son's greatest wish was to meet a real Royal Guard, but they weren't sure how to make that dream come true. The idea came to Sarah one evening while watching Tommy arrange his toy soldiers before bedtime. "What if we took him back to London for his birthday?" she suggested to Michael. "Maybe we could find a way for him to see the guards up close again." Michael loved the idea, but he wanted to do something even more special for their remarkable son. What if we could somehow arrange for him to actually meet one of them? Michael wondered aloud. Sarah's eyes lit up at the possibility, though they both knew it would be nearly impossible. The Royal Guards were known for their strict protocols and their duty to remain focused on their important job of protection. Little did Tommy know that his parents were already planning the adventure of a lifetime. As he drifted off to sleep surrounded by his beloved toy guards, dreams of red coats and black hats filled his mind. Tomorrow would bring him one day closer to his 9th birthday, and one day closer to a meeting that would change his life forever. The next morning, Tommy woke up with his usual enthusiasm, ready to tell his parents about the dream he'd had where he was marching alongside the Royal Guards. As he shared his dream over breakfast, Sarah and Michael exchanged knowing glances. Their son had no idea that his parents were about to turn his wildest dreams into reality. Sarah spent the next few days researching everything she could about visiting the Royal Guards. She discovered that tourists could watch the changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace, but getting close enough for Tommy to actually interact with a guard seemed impossible. The guards were trained to maintain their composure and focus, rarely breaking their stoic stance for anyone. However, Sarah refused to give up on her son's dream. She began reaching out to various official channels, writing emails to the palace's public relations department, and even contacting local London tour guides who might have connections. Most of the responses were polite but discouraging. The guards simply didn't interact with the public while on duty. Michael decided to take a different approach. He remembered reading stories about the guards occasionally showing small acts of kindness, especially toward children. He started searching online for any accounts of guards breaking protocol for special circumstances. What he found gave him hope. There were a few documented cases where guards had shown compassion, particularly when it came to children with special needs. One evening, while Tommy was drawing another picture of a royal guard, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. It was from Mrs. Patterson, a family friend who worked as a travel coordinator in London. Sarah had mentioned Tommy's dream to her weeks earlier, not expecting much help, but Mrs. Patterson had been quietly working behind the scenes. "I have some wonderful news," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice filled with excitement. "I spoke with my contact at the palace, and while they can't guarantee anything, they said that if you bring Tommy during a specific time when the guards change shifts, there might be an opportunity for a brief interaction. The guards have been known to acknowledge children, especially those with special circumstances." Sarah's heart raced with excitement, but she tried to manage her expectations. She didn't want to build up Tommy's hopes only to have them crushed if nothing special happened. She and Michael decided to plan the trip as a birthday surprise, focusing on the excitement of seeing the guards rather than the possibility of meeting them. The couple spent the next week secretly planning every detail of Tommy's birthday trip to London. They booked a hotel within walking distance of Buckingham Palace and researched the best times to visit, when crowds would be smaller. They even packed Tommy's favorite toy soldier to bring along for the adventure. Tommy noticed his parents whispering more than usual and caught them looking at something on the computer that they quickly closed when he entered the room. His 9-year-old curiosity was piqued, but his parents just smiled and told him they were planning something special for his birthday. The night before Tommy's birthday, Sarah and Michael sat him down for what they thought would be a simple surprise reveal. "Tommy, we have a very special birthday present for you," Sarah began, her voice trembling with excitement. "Tomorrow we're going on a trip to London to see your favorite royal guards." Tommy's reaction was more overwhelming than his parents had anticipated. His eyes filled with tears of pure joy, and he threw his arms around both of them, squeezing as tight as his small arms could manage. "Really? Really, truly?" he asked over and over as if he couldn't believe such a wonderful thing could actually happen. "Really, truly," Michael confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. Tommy spent the rest of the evening carefully selecting which toy soldiers would come with him on the trip and practicing his best salute in the mirror. He wanted to be ready to show the guards how much he respected them. That night, Tommy could barely sleep. He kept getting up to check that his small suitcase was still packed and ready by his bedroom door. He had carefully placed his favorite guard figurine on top of his clothes, along with a drawing he had made specifically to show to a real guard if he got the chance. Sarah and Michael stayed up late, double-checking their travel arrangements and discussing their hopes for the trip. They had decided not to tell Tommy about the possibility of actually meeting a guard. They wanted him to be surprised if it happened, rather than disappointed if it didn't. The next morning, Tommy was awake before dawn, too excited to sleep any longer. He had put on his nicest clothes and styled his hair carefully, wanting to look his best for the guards. As the family loaded into their car for the drive to the train station, Tommy clutched his toy soldier tightly and chattered non-stop about all the things he wanted to see. During the train ride to London, Tommy pressed his face to the window, watching the countryside rush by while telling his parents every fact he knew about the royal guards. Other passengers on the train couldn't help but smile at the young boy's infectious enthusiasm and obvious joy. As they approached London, Tommy's excitement reached a fever pitch. "Are we almost there? Can we see the guards now?" he asked every few minutes. Sarah and Michael exchanged glances, both hoping that their careful planning would result in the magical experience their son deserved. Little did they know that the guards they were about to encounter were already prepared to make Tommy's birthday more special than anyone could have imagined. The London streets were bustling with their usual morning activity as Tommy and his parents made their way toward Buckingham Palace. Tommy had been walking for 20 minutes, but his energy never seemed to fade. He skipped along the sidewalk, pointing out every red bus and black taxi, convinced that everything in London was connected to his beloved guards somehow. "Look, Mummy, that bus is the same color as the guard uniforms," he exclaimed, tugging on Sarah's hand. His parents smiled at his excitement, but they could also see other tourists beginning to gather near the palace gates. Sarah hoped the crowds wouldn't be too overwhelming for Tommy, who sometimes became anxious in busy places. As they turned the corner and Buckingham Palace came into view, Tommy stopped dead in his tracks. His mouth fell open, and for the first time that morning he was completely silent. The palace looked even more magnificent than he remembered from his school trip, and there, standing at attention in front of the ornate gates, were 2 royal guards in their full ceremonial uniforms. "They're real," Tommy whispered as if he couldn't quite believe his eyes. "They're really real." His parents watched as their son's face transformed with pure wonder. This was exactly the reaction they had hoped for, and the day was just beginning. The family approached the palace gate slowly, joining the small crowd of tourists who were also admiring the guards. Tommy held his toy soldier tightly in one hand and his father's hand with the other. His eyes never left the 2 guards, studying every detail of their uniforms, from the golden buttons on their red coats to the impressive black bearskin hats that made them look even taller than they already were. One of the guards was positioned directly in front of the main gate, while the other stood at a side entrance. Both men maintained the perfect posture and serious expression that Tommy had tried so hard to copy in his bedroom mirror. They stared straight ahead, seemingly unaware of the growing crowd of admirers gathering around them. "Daddy, why don't they move?" Tommy asked in a loud whisper that several other tourists could hear. Michael knelt down to Tommy's level and explained quietly how the guards were working, protecting the Queen, and had to stay very focused on their important job. Tommy nodded solemnly, understanding the seriousness of their duty. He stood up as straight as he could, trying to mirror their posture out of respect. Sarah noticed several other tourists watching Tommy with amused smiles, clearly charmed by the little boy's obvious admiration for the guards. After about 10 minutes of watching, Tommy began to grow restless. He wanted to get closer, to see more details of their uniforms, but the barriers kept tourists at a respectful distance. He started walking back and forth along the fence, trying to get the best possible view from different angles. It was during one of these movements that something unexpected happened. Tommy had positioned himself directly in front of the guard at the main gate, about 15 feet away. He was standing at attention just like he had practiced, holding his toy soldier proudly, when the guard's eyes briefly shifted downward and made contact with Tommy's eager gaze. The moment lasted only a second, but Tommy's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Mummy, Daddy." "He looked at me." "The guard looked at me," he whispered excitedly, bouncing on his toes but trying to maintain his respectful posture. Sarah and Michael had seen the brief exchange too, and their hearts swelled with happiness for their son. They could see that other tourists had also noticed the small interaction, and several people were now watching Tommy with increased interest. Encouraged by this tiny acknowledgement, Tommy decided to do something brave. He raised his small hand in a careful salute, just like he had practiced countless times at home. His form wasn't perfect, but his sincerity was unmistakable. He held the salute for several seconds, his face serious and respectful. What happened next surprised everyone, including Tommy's parents. The guard at the main gate, while maintaining his forward gaze and official posture, gave the slightest nod of his head, so subtle that someone not paying close attention might have missed it entirely. But Tommy didn't miss it. His eyes grew wide with amazement, and he lowered his salute slowly, a huge smile spreading across his face. "He nodded at me," he whispered in awe. The guard nodded back at me. The small crowd of tourists had grown larger, and many of them had witnessed this sweet exchange. Some were taking pictures, others were smiling and whispering to their companions about the adorable little boy and his obvious love for the guards. Tommy's parents were thrilled, thinking this small acknowledgement was more than they could have hoped for, but as they would soon discover, the guards had noticed something special about Tommy, and their compassion was about to create a moment that none of them would ever forget. The guard at the side entrance had been watching the interaction too, and he had seen something that touched his heart. A child whose pure joy and respect reminded him why he was proud to serve in his role. As the morning progressed and more tourists gathered, both guards began to pay special attention to the little boy who stood so proudly with his toy soldier. waiting patiently for any small sign of acknowledgement from his heroes. Guard James Mitchell had been serving at Buckingham Palace for 3 years, and he thought he had seen everything. Tourists took countless photos. Children made silly faces trying to get reactions, and adults often made jokes about the guards being like statues. But Tommy was different, and James could see it from the moment the little boy had arrived. Unlike other children who giggled and tried to distract the guards, Tommy stood with genuine respect and admiration. James had noticed the way the boy held himself straight, trying to copy their posture, and how carefully he had executed his salute. There was something pure and sincere about this child that touched James deeply. From his position, James could hear Tommy talking quietly to his parents about the guards' uniforms, their job protecting the Queen, and how important their work was. The boy's knowledge was impressive, but more than that, his respect was genuine. James found himself fighting back a smile as he listened to Tommy's earnest questions and observations. When Tommy had saluted him, James felt his professional composure waver for just a moment. The child's salute wasn't technically perfect, but it was executed with such sincerity and admiration that James couldn't help but acknowledge it with a subtle nod. He had bent the rules slightly, but something about this special little boy made it feel like the right thing to do. Guard William Cooper, stationed at the side entrance, had been watching the interaction between his colleague and Tommy with growing interest. He had 17 years of experience and had developed an ability to read people quickly. This child wasn't just another tourist. There was something remarkable about his genuine appreciation for their service. As the morning progressed, William noticed that Tommy never grew bored or restless like most children would. Instead, the boy remained fascinated, studying every detail of their uniforms and movements. William observed how Tommy's parents watched their son with obvious pride and love, and he began to piece together that this child might have special needs. The realization made William's heart swell with emotion. He had a nephew with autism, and he recognized the intense focus and pure joy that children with special needs often displayed when they found something that truly captured their interest. This little boy had found that something in the Royal Guards, and William felt honored to be part of that joy. When the changing of the guard was announced for 30 minutes later, William made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. During his brief break between shifts, he planned to do something unprecedented. He was going to approach Tommy and his family. As the crowds began to gather for the ceremony, Tommy's excitement reached new heights. He had been waiting for this moment, having read about the changing of the guard ceremony in every book about the Royal Guards his parents had bought him. Sarah and Michael positioned themselves where Tommy would have the best view, both amazed by how long their son had been able to maintain his focus and enthusiasm. "Look, Tommy," Michael pointed out, "more guards are coming for the ceremony." Tommy's eyes followed his father's gesture and widened with excitement as he saw additional guards marching in formation toward their positions. This was beyond his wildest dreams. Guard William Cooper's replacement arrived right on schedule, and William prepared to step away from his post. Instead of heading directly to the guardhouse as protocol usually demanded, he made his way slowly around the crowd, his tall frame and distinctive uniform drawing attention from tourists who assumed he was part of the ceremony. Sarah was the first to notice the guard walking in their direction. "Michael," she whispered, nudging her husband and nodding toward the approaching figure. Michael looked up and felt his heart skip a beat as he realized the guard was heading straight toward them. Tommy was so focused on watching the ceremony preparations that he didn't notice the guard approaching until William stopped directly in front of him. When Tommy looked up and found himself face to face with one of his heroes, his mouth fell open in complete shock. "Good morning, young man," William said in his deep, official voice, though his eyes were kind. "I couldn't help but notice your excellent salute earlier. Have you been studying the Royal Guards?" Tommy was so overwhelmed that he couldn't speak for a moment. He clutched his toy soldier tighter and looked up at this imposing figure, who was actually talking to him. Sarah and Michael stood frozen, hardly believing what was happening. "Yes, sir," Tommy finally managed to whisper, his voice filled with awe. "I love the Royal Guards. I have toy soldiers and pictures, and I practice standing still like you do." His words came out in a rush, as if he was afraid the guard might disappear if he didn't say everything quickly enough. William's stern expression softened completely as he looked down at this remarkable child. I can see that you do, he said gently. You show great respect, and that means a great deal to us. What's your name, soldier? Tommy, the boy replied, standing up as straight as he could. It's my birthday today, and my mummy and daddy brought me here to see you. His honesty and joy were so genuine that several nearby tourists had stopped to watch this unexpected interaction. William felt his heart melt completely. Without thinking about protocol or rules, he made a decision that would create a memory to last a lifetime. Well then, Tommy, he said, I think this calls for something very special. What William did next would surprise everyone watching and create a moment of pure magic that would be talked about for years to come. Guard William Cooper looked down at Tommy's eager face and made a decision that went against every rule in the book. Tommy, he said softly, would you like to stand guard with me for a few minutes? The crowd that had gathered around them fell completely silent. Sarah gasped and covered her mouth with her hands, while Michael felt tears welling up in his eyes. Tommy looked up at William with such pure amazement that several tourists began wiping their own eyes. Really? Tommy whispered, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. I can stand guard with you? Like a real guard? Absolutely, William replied, his voice warm but still maintaining his official tone. But you must remember that this is a very serious job. Can you be as still and focused as we are? Tommy nodded solemnly, understanding the importance of what was being offered to him. He had practiced this moment countless times in his bedroom, but now it was actually happening. William positioned himself next to Tommy, both of them facing forward toward the palace gates. Now, Tommy, William instructed quietly, a royal guard stands tall, keeps his eyes forward, and protects what is important. Can you do that with me? Tommy straightened his spine, lifted his chin, and stared ahead with the most serious expression he could manage. In his small hand, he held his toy soldier proudly as if it were part of his official equipment. The sight of the tall, imposing guard standing shoulder to shoulder with the small boy was so moving that tourists began taking pictures and videos, many with tears in their eyes. For 5 full minutes, Tommy and William stood together in perfect silence. Tommy didn't fidget, didn't look around, and didn't speak. He had found the focus and determination that all those hours of practice in his bedroom had prepared him for. Sarah and Michael watched their son with overwhelming pride, hardly believing the compassion this stranger was showing their child. Guard James Mitchell, still at his official post, had been watching the entire interaction with deep respect for his colleague's kindness. When he saw an opportunity, he also bent protocol slightly, giving Tommy an official salute that made the boy's face light up with pure joy, though Tommy maintained his serious guard position perfectly. The crowd that had gathered was now quite large, and word was spreading among tourists about the special moment taking place. People were quietly sharing the story with newcomers, explaining how this little boy's love for the guards had moved these normally stoic men to show such extraordinary kindness. After their 5 minutes of standing guard together, William turned to Tommy with a smile. Outstanding work, Guard Tommy, he said officially. You have the makings of an excellent protector. Tommy beamed with pride but maintained his respectful posture. Thank you, sir, he replied, his voice filled with happiness but still showing the seriousness he felt about the honor he had just received. But William wasn't finished with his acts of kindness. Reaching into his uniform pocket, he pulled out something that made Tommy's eyes grow wide with wonder. A small, official Royal Guard pin that was normally only given to members of the regiment or VIP visitors to the palace. This is for you, Tommy, William said, pinning it carefully to Tommy's jacket. This pin means you are an honorary member of the Royal Guards. Wear it with pride, and remember that being a guard means showing kindness, courage, and respect to everyone you meet. Tommy looked down at the pin on his jacket and then back up at William with tears of joy streaming down his face. I'll wear it forever, he promised, and I'll always remember to be kind and brave like you. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, moved by the incredible display of compassion they had just witnessed. Many people were openly crying, including several tough-looking tourists who hadn't expected to be so emotionally affected by what they had seen. Sarah and Michael approached to thank William, but they were so overwhelmed with gratitude that they could barely speak. Thank you, Sarah finally managed. You've given our son a memory that will last his entire life. William looked at Tommy's glowing face and replied, He gave us something special too. It's not often we get to remember why we're truly proud to serve. Tommy reminded us today that sometimes the most important part of our job is showing kindness to those who need it most. As William prepared to leave for his break, he knelt down to Tommy's level one more time. "Keep practicing your posture, guard Tommy," he said with a wink. "And remember, the most important thing a guard can do is protect people's hearts by being kind." Tommy saluted William one more time, this time with perfect form, and William returned the salute with equal precision. As the guard walked away, Tommy clutched his new pin and looked up at his parents with a joy so pure and complete that everyone around them could feel it. The changing of the guard ceremony continued as scheduled. But for Tommy and his family, the real magic had already happened. They had witnessed compassion in action, and Tommy had learned that his heroes weren't just brave and strong. They were also incredibly kind. The train ride back home was completely different from their journey to London that morning. Tommy sat quietly by the window, carefully holding his Royal Guard pin and toy soldier, occasionally looking down at his new treasure with a smile that seemed to light up the entire train car. Other passengers noticed the happy family and the little boy's obvious joy, and several people asked about the pin Tommy wore so proudly. Each time someone asked, Tommy would stand up straight and explain seriously, "I'm an honorary Royal Guard. I stood guard at Buckingham Palace today, and Guard William gave me this pin because I did a good job protecting the Queen." His earnest explanation and obvious pride melted the hearts of everyone who heard his story. Sarah and Michael spent the journey home reflecting on what they had witnessed. They had hoped for a nice birthday experience for Tommy, but what they had received was something far beyond their wildest expectations. The guard's compassion had not only made Tommy's day special, it had shown him that his heroes were even more wonderful than he had imagined. "Mummy," Tommy said suddenly, turning from the window. "Guard William said the most important thing is to be kind to people. I want to be kind like him." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes at her son's words. The lesson Tommy had learned wasn't just about standing straight or wearing uniforms. It was about the power of kindness and compassion. When they arrived home that evening, Tommy immediately went to his room to carefully place his new pin next to his collection of toy guards. He spent a long time arranging and rearranging his soldiers, telling each one about his adventure and about the real guards he had met. That night at dinner, Tommy's grandmother called to wish him a happy birthday. Tommy spent 20 minutes telling her every detail of his day, from the moment he first saw the guards to receiving his honorary pin. His excitement was so contagious that his grandmother found herself wiping away happy tears as she listened to his story. Over the following weeks, Tommy's experience continued to impact his life in beautiful ways. At school, he shared his story during show and tell, wearing his Royal Guard pin proudly. His classmates were amazed by his adventure, and Tommy found himself surrounded by new friends who wanted to hear more about the guards and their kindness. His speech therapist noticed an immediate improvement in Tommy's communication skills. The confidence he had gained from his positive interaction with the guards seemed to carry over into all areas of his life. He spoke more clearly, made eye contact more easily, and showed increased self-esteem in social situations. Most importantly, Tommy began looking for ways to show kindness to others, just as Guard William had shown kindness to him. When a new student joined his class and seemed lonely, Tommy was the first to invite him to play. When his neighbor's elderly dog needed walking, Tommy volunteered to help. The lesson about kindness being the most important job of all had taken deep root in his heart. Sarah and Michael noticed that their son's experience had changed him in the most wonderful way. While he still loved the Royal Guards and continued collecting toy soldiers and drawing pictures, he now talked just as much about being kind and helping others as he did about uniforms and ceremonies. 6 months later, Sarah received an unexpected letter in the mail. The return address was from Buckingham Palace, and inside was a formal invitation for Tommy to attend the Queen's birthday parade as a special guest. Apparently, word of Tommy's story had reached higher authorities, and they wanted to honor the little boy who had captured the hearts of the guards. Tommy's reaction to the invitation was pure joy, but this time it was different from his previous excitement. "Mummy," he said thoughtfully, "can we invite some other children to come with us? Maybe some kids who have never seen the guards before? I want to share the happiness like Guard William shared it with me." Sarah and Michael exchanged amazed glances at their son's thoughtfulness. The little boy who had once dreamed of meeting his heroes had learned something even more valuable, that the greatest joy comes from sharing kindness with others. On the day of the Queen's birthday parade, Tommy attended as promised, bringing along 2 classmates whose families couldn't afford such trips. He spent the entire day pointing out details about the guards to his friends, sharing his knowledge and enthusiasm just as generously as Guard William had shared his time and compassion. As they watched the magnificent ceremony, Tommy stood proudly wearing his honorary Royal Guard pin, but the most beautiful thing about him wasn't his treasure from that special birthday. It was the kindness in his heart that had grown. From that magical moment when a guard chose compassion over protocol, Guard William Cooper never forgot about Tommy either. Years later, he would tell the story to new recruits, reminding them that sometimes the most important part of their job wasn't standing at attention or following rules perfectly. It was recognizing when a moment called for human kindness and having the courage to provide it. Tommy's 9th birthday had become more than just a special day. It had become the beginning of a lifetime, dedicated to spreading the same compassion that had been shown to him. And in the hearts of everyone who witnessed that magical moment at Buckingham Palace, the memory remained as a beautiful reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create the most profound and lasting impact.